Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 315 of the Fun with Cars, Formula One, and Other Motorsports podcasts, or episode 2 of 2022. And that makes sense to have a lot of twos. It is February 22nd of 2022, and let's just say it's 2 p.m. I'm Robin Warner, and today I'm joined by the man who may just be in contention for the race director position, Christopher Roche. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Robin.
It is, as I said, Tuesday afternoon, February 22nd, and Chris and I are going to talk about the brand new 2022 spec Formula One cars and, a couple other things. Chris, where do you want to start?
Yeah, it's been exciting times in Formula One land with cars, 22 spec cars shown in a variety of guises. We've had renderings, we've had actual launches, we've had some cars circulating, we've had some false dawns, we've had some smoke and mirrors. It's been fascinating. But the overriding news is the fact that the cars look different to each other, which I think is exciting. I think there was a fear that the latest rules and regulations would mandate cars that were very similar in appearance, and that's not been the case. So we've probably got more variety for this year than we did last year.
Yes, absolutely. But to me, that's not the biggest news. I completely agree with you that that is significant, and that we are, in fact, seeing what we have seen in the past, which is the first year of a major rule change. We get a wider variety before a quote-unquote winning formula starts to mold into the shape of every Formula One car. But to me, the biggest news was that at the Mercedes launch, Lewis Hamilton was a part of it.
Yeah, Lewis is back. Looks like he's ready to compete this season and potentially next. So seemed in pretty good spirits, went away, took his mind to other places, has come back and seems happy and ready to go. Feisty even, I would say he's feisty.
Hungry, I think, might be a good way to say it. I think we're going to see some real passion in his driving that we haven't seen in a while. I'm hopeful of that anyway.
Yeah, so we have all the drivers that we were hopeful to get this season. We've obviously had a reshuffle. We've had some driver contracts, at least one notable contract announcement in the last couple of weeks with Lando Norris signing an extension at Mclaren. So now he's going to be driving those cars till the end of 25 at least. There's no get-out clauses, so if this McLaren bombs, he is going to be driving it at the back, but hopefully it won't do that. Interestingly, Andreas Seidel and Zach Brown also extended their deals with McLaren, so we've got stability there, which is a good thing, as McLaren have been definitely going in the right direction the last few seasons. So from the driver perspective, we've got a couple of teams that are locked and loaded for at least the next 2 years with Mercedes and McLaren, both with consistent driver lineups. You have to go...
and Alpine.
So Alpine, I didn't think Alonso had re-signed. Did I miss that news?
He's through... I suppose maybe I misinterpreted. He's here through this season, certainly.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a lot of long-term driver deals, particularly with sort of the young up-and-coming set. So if you think people like Charles Leclerc, Lando, George Russell, those guys have been locked up long-term. But there are quite a few drivers, including Fernando, who basically have a contract through just this year. So Perez at Red Bull, Sainz at Ferrari, Alonso at Alpine, and Vettel at Aston Martin all will be looking for new seats or to extend their current time in their current seat beyond the end of this year. So those guys are all sort of, I guess you could say, slightly less secure in their current drives. But people like Verstappen, an extension is expected to be announced soon with him and Red Bull. Ocon obviously locked in that long-term deal at Alpine. We know Stroll's not going anywhere at Aston Martin.
But so many people are going to be hungry for Stroll. Are you sure about that?
yeah, pretty certain. I'd bet a lot of money on that one.
That's evidence right there that he's race director bound. You got that inside line of knowledge, Chris.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've mentioned it for a second time. I mean, we know who the new race directors are, don't we? So we've got a couple of chaps who have been announced as the replacement for our intriguing friend whose name we don't need to mention. But Niels Wittich and Eduardo Freitas are the two guys who are going to be sharing race director responsibility moving forward. They both have had that type of role in the past. Niels had that role for DTM and Eduardo in WEC, amongst other categories. And the best part of the story is they're bringing Herbie Blash back. Now, Herbie is, an old mucker of Bernie Eccleston and Charlie Whiting when they were all at Brabham together making highly illegal cars like the fan car. So Herbie knows a thing or two about running Formula One, and it's going to be fun to see him back out of retirement, assisting the two new race directors.
So I will tell you, I will, out of respect for you, Chris, I will not say his name either, but I will say that his name is pronounced much the way someone from, small town Alabama might pronounce Felipe Massa's name. So that is the person that is out.
He's going to have another job
official.
in the FIA. He's going to be taken care of. So anyone who's in his corner need not worry. He's still gainfully employed.
He is still gainfully employed. But it was fascinating to me because with his departure and these new people coming in and, kind of the, hey, this is the direction we're going, it's, without overtly saying it, it's kind of an admission of wrongdoing, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep talking about this story, but there's no doubt that you would normally infer from the actions of the FIA that there was a humongous error made in the prior season, but not that they've admitted it. In fact, they say that Mr. He who shall not be named did a great job, and this is no way to do with some sort of lack of performance or making up the rules as he went along.
Right, it's a total coincidence.
Exactly. He just wanted to go on to pastures new. They're not releasing the report that was created into what happened in that fateful afternoon at Abu Dhabi. And they're certainly not suggesting for any moment that there should be a re-evaluation of the results, which is all to be expected. Anyone who's followed Formula One or any form of motorsport will know that the FIA generally defends all their actions to the hilt. Then they're never capable of doing anything wrong, and nothing will ever be changed. So that is what it is. There's no point in getting too upset about it. We have a new season. We have a new structure in place to try and govern the way races are run. They are, rightfully acknowledging that the old race director position was largely untenable for one individual, and so now they've created a better support structure. The director will no longer be able to be directly communicated by the teams. He will have a remote virtual race control to help him make decisions. So all of the things that you would have thought would have been in place previously are now going to be put in place for this year. So hopefully we'll have less of the nonsense that we saw sometimes at last season. Yeah.
And I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, but I got quite amused as a fun little aside that in the Twitterverse, there was this small but not quiet portion of fans quite angry at Jonathan Wheatley of Red Bull for contacting the person who shall not be named over and over and over again, quite egregiously, many people thought.
Well, he's doing his job.
Yeah, he was doing his job, and he was highly effective at it.
Yeah. I mean, he and the Red Bull team did everything they could to try and, get their man a result, and they achieved that. So you can only, that's the way motor racing works, right? The gloves are off. This is a high-stakes game. You're going to do whatever you can. You're going to lobby whoever you can to get the situation to favour your man or your team. And I don't have any problem with that. And the point of the FIA and the personnel that are supposed to be running the race is to ensure that it's a level playing field, that rules are interpreted correctly and consistently across all the teams. So that's where the problem lies, not with Jonathan Wheatley. That's for sure.
Yeah. And the irony of what you just said, it's absolutely true. But if any of the drivers took their gloves off, probably Jonathan Wheatley would make a phone call and complain about exactly that. There is another there was another man that was out, still not a huge surprise, but less expected, and that was Otmar Safauer. He is no longer with Aston Martin.
Right, but he is now at Alpine. So that was the good news. We did speculate that Otmar would find another job quite quickly after being
highly capable at what he does. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's a very sensible signing by Alpine, who seem to be making some good decisions. You wonder if it's going to come a little too late for this season, or maybe even next season. But certainly they're making some good decisions moving forward.
How is Otmar's French? Do we know? I mean, they don't speak much French in Dearborn. I know that.
Well, good news for him is they don't speak much French in Enstone either, which is where the race team is based.
Fair enough.
They have the engine department, the power unit department in France, in a place called Viry, I believe, which I think French would definitely be handy. But the race team itself, that started out as Tollman way back in the 80s, and then morphed into Benetton, Renault for a while, then Lotus, and a variety of other random names for short periods of time. Now back as Renault. Yeah, it's always been known as Team Enstone within the sort of Formula One fraternity, and it's in the heartland of the British racing Midlands, and he'll be fine. He'll probably be using all the old suppliers that he used to use when he was at Team Silverstone, or Aston Martin as it's now known.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So there's more news I want to discuss. The sprint qualifying. There will be another 3 sprint qualifying events for 2022. Exciting, perhaps? Yeah,
that's right. So there was a rumour that we might have 6 this year, but there's been some debate over the budget cap and the cost of running extra sprints. So they finally came up with a compromise of maintaining the quantity of 3. So it's going to be Imola, the Austrian Grand Prix, and Brazil will host the sprints. But they've tweaked a few other aspects of it. They've decided that the fastest lap of the weekend will now be awarded the title of a pole position. So, i.e., the Friday qualifying session on Friday will be called the pole position holder, but then that person will have pole for the sprint, and the winner of the sprint will take the first position on the grid for the race on Sunday. But pole will go back to the Friday qualifying session, which is what it always should have really been.
Wait, hold on.
That clears that one up.
What you're saying is, who is awarded pole position for the weekend?
The fastest driver on Friday. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay. But that is not necessarily where they will start on Sunday, which I suppose is not too different from the way it's always been, because there's been penalties or grid changes for whatever reason that shuffle the Sunday field, and that's been the case for years and years.
Yeah. I mean, so they will have pole for the sprint race. But that's, depending on how they do in the sprint, will determine where they start in the actual Grand Prix. So, I mean, it never made sense the way they classified pole as being the winner of the sprint in my mind. And I think a lot of other people were unhappy with that, which is why they've made the change. So, but they've changed. This is more controversial. They've changed the points. So last year we had 3 points for the winner of the sprint, 2 for second, 1 for the third place. But now the top 8 finishers will all score points. 8 points for the winner.
Top 8? Yeah, whoa!
Top 8,
I didn't.
Yeah. 8 points for the winner of the sprint. So that's pretty significant now. That's a
Hold on,
decent
wait. Is it 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1?
It is, yep.
Oh boy. Okay, so you're starting to get into some weird places where if you finish first in the sprint qualifying and then second in the race, you will have scored 1 point more than the winner of the Grand Prix if they didn't score any points in the sprint qualifying.
Yeah, that's right. I mean,
wow.
That's now a significant, tally, right? You can get 24 points from the sprint, which is almost equivalent to a Grand Prix win. So, essentially it's another Grand Prix that's been added. You've got to do well in the sprints and get some decent points, or you're going to be on the back foot. Definitely.
Why do they? There's just so much added complication to all of this. It's just It's like, you know what we need? More rules and more sections and more variants.
Oh, you're going to love the next rule that we can talk about then. So
well, jump in.
Do you remember the Belgian Grand Prix last year was slightly controversial because they never actually performed a racing lap. They only ran behind the
racing laps. They just were very slow behind the pace car.
Right. So there were some people unhappy with the half point being awarded to the finishers of that non-event. So they've changed the rules for that. So now, this year, you need a minimum of 2 laps by the leader without safety car or VSC to qualify for points. So by the new rules, Belgium would not have awarded any points at all last year. But they now have a very complicated sliding scale. So if you've done more than 2 laps but less than 25% of the race distance, there's a certain amount of points that are awarded.
Oh, come
more
on.
More than 25% and less than 50%, there's another slew of points awarded, and then so on and so forth. So in order to get full points for a Grand Prix, there needs to be more than 3/4 of the laps performed. If only 65% of the laps, the winner would only get 19 points. So that's going to keep us all on our toes as we get some wet Grand Prix.
Oh man!
This season.
Why? Why? I mean, do they understand? Okay, just adding layers and layers of complication that's purely reactionary to something that happened in the past is just going to open itself up. You're going to be rife for more controversy when something slightly different happens in the future. So much of this is just reactionary nonsense. Sorry. I'll put my soapbox away. I apologize.
I mean, on a serious note, I mean, one of the things that happens during a wet race is the drivers, particularly if they're running behind the safety car or VSC situation for any period of time, they'll be asked what they think the conditions are like. So now, depending on the championship situation and depending on how your particular car is faring in the conditions of the day, you may have drivers lobbying for the race to be curtailed, knowing that the different levels of point payout could influence their championship. Title effort.
Man. Yeah, and this plays in the hands, adds importance to the strategists in the team.
Of course it does. Yeah.
So now this is all tables and graphs. Man.
Yeah, it does seem. I mean, I like the fact that they've eliminated the situation that can occur at Spa, because that was terrible, particularly for the guys and girls who paid to go and watch a race. That was not acceptable. But this does seem like a very complicated answer or solution to that problem, which is far from ideal. But should we talk about the cars, because that's been great to see. I
wanted to kind of get the silly news out of the way, and then we could dive into the cars a little bit. But there must be some other I feel like we haven't exhausted the news silliness. We've gone through my notes here, but I got to be missing something. Oh, yes. No, we are missing something. What is the lorry situation with the sprint qualifying? And also, what if it's wet during the sprint qualifying event? How will those points be divided up?
If you want to talk silly, here's something silly. Mercedes-Benz did some sort of, and I don't remember the details or long since forgot them, to allow someone to win a tour of their factory. And guess who won? Guess who won the prize or made the highest bid for charity or whatever the case was? It was
Christian Horner.
Christian Horner.
Yeah.
So Horner was going to get a VIP tour of the Mercedes factory in Brackley. So then Mercedes had to scan the rules of the competition to find some way to not allow him to take up his prize. I mean, it's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just gotten to the point where we're all trolling each other. I don't know. Okay, yes, the race cars. The race cars themselves, at first glance, to me, they looked a lot like Indy cars.
Really?
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. Well, not quite as pretty. You're right. I don't want to offend the IndyCar folks.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not seeing that. I mean,
Let me ask you a different question. Let me ask you a different question.
Mm-hmm.
I am drinking a morning tea, a breakfast tea. It is a hot tea, I'll let everyone know. I'm drinking it in the afternoon. Is that like a cardinal sin? Am I going to get a letter from the Queen? Where are the rules about drinking a morning tea in the afternoon?
Well, afternoon tea is an absolute tradition in England and Great Britain. So you could drink a breakfast blend in the afternoon. No problem at all, mate. You're on solid territory there. What you can't do is dump ice in it.
Yes, I'm still far from finished in that quest. You know, that is my Mount Everest. And I will climb it and open Great Britain's eyes to the beautiful nature of cooled tea with some lemon. Oh, it's just delightful. But in the meantime, I'm like a double agent spy. I'm trying to get into the system and expand people's minds from the inside.
Okay. So
yes, I always love your.
Moving on.
I'm lost for words, and this is too stupid for me to respond to. I'm just going to continue. I'm translating for everyone. That's what okay means. Yes, please. Let's talk about the race cars. Yeah, there's definitely a wider variety than I expected. As we all expected, none of them look like the car that Formula One itself showed last summer, but there is a wide variety and interesting takes on the rules.
Well, I'll have to pick you up on that. So there was one car that looked exactly like the show car from last year, and that was the red one, because people just repainted the show car.
Yeah, the ones that actually showed their car. I'll add that stipulation.
I mean, there are some really grainy images on the internet showing a Red Bull shakedown at Silverstone. The images aren't very good, but what you can tell is it does look nothing like their show car or their reveal car. So, yeah, there's been, let's just touch on that. So there's been some real absurd launches here. So Haas kicked everything off with some renderings of their car. They have since run a shakedown with a car that looks quite different. So I don't know what entirely was the point of that reveal or those renderings, because there was no new sponsors. Delivery hadn't changed. So it was just sort of a waste of everyone's time. But the good news is, for Haas fans, is that they have a car. It's running already, and it looks like a decent job. They're still using a lot of the Ferrari components, but it looks like a fairly sensible design. And so hopefully it'll be more competitive this season. But they didn't make any egregious errors.
Darn well better be more competitive this season. I mean, last year made Williams' most dreadful season look not so bad. I mean, Haas was just in terrible shape last year.
Yeah, I mean, Haas, Williams, and Alfa Romeo all have work to do to catch up with the midfield, don't they? But yeah, I mean, so it's a very sort of Russian-esque theme to it, continuing from last year's look. But yeah, I mean, they're out on the track, they're running, so it bodes well for at least starting the season without reliability issues, hopefully. Red Bull, I guess one of the news about Red Bull, other than their new sponsors, was that Max has decided to use the number 1 on his car instead of 33.
Yes,
and it's the first driver since Vettel in 14 to run with number 1, because Hamilton was never that interested. And, of course, Rosberg retired.
When did they officially make that? I forget which year it was, where you could start running your own number as opposed to being 1 through 20 or 24 or whenever there were some extra teams.
Yeah, I don't remember when it's been a few years now, hasn't it? Because I think, hasn't Max been 33 since he joined the sport? I would wager, but I'm not 100% sure. But it's been quite a few seasons where they picked their number, and so Hamilton's always just wanted to run 44, which is a number he's used ever since he was karting. So he's But yeah, so Max is gonna do that, so that'll be cool for his fans.
Winning the championship doesn't change my life.
Yeah, exactly. But slap number 1 straight on the front of the car. But look, hey, you want someone to be happy about winning the title, right? I mean, that would demean, I think, the sport if it was like no great shakes and you move on. So no, I think his reaction's pretty normal. So the first proper reveal, I would say, was the Aston Martin, the AMR 22, which surprised people because it's got the world's longest side pods ever created. It's in the record books. Go check it out.
That's an interesting record to hold.
Yeah, they've gone their own way with really high side pods that run almost the entire length of the side of the vehicle, and they've got a significant undercut and cooling louvers. It's interesting because there are a couple of other cars out there with longer pods, but most of them are angled down as it goes towards the rear axle, but the Aston Martins don't. So it's a very
you just inherently, you think about the teardrop shape when you're thinking aerodynamics. I mean, just at the highest, most fundamental level, right? And a side pod kind of coming towards the center of the car would be very much part of that teardrop shape.
Yeah, obviously the aerodynamics of the cars have changed a lot with the tunnels now being introduced for 22. So a lot of the downforce is going to be created by the Venturi tunnels that run underneath the floor.
Sure.
And so, you're not surprised that the teams are reassessing the rest of the aerodynamic package. But, there aren't two side pods that look the same so far. And Aston Martin have gone for this really high, long pod. Obviously, that's going to affect the airflow through the coke bottle area in the rear suspension area. So it will be interesting to see if they've come up with something really brilliant or it's a complete disaster. I think the jury's out until we get some lap times in testing, but it's certainly a very unique direction.
And there's also been some talk that, Alpine took a slightly different direction as well. And, that could be, there's some question of like, well, if they took a different interpretation of the rules, was that cunning, or are they going to have to be playing some catch up?
Yeah, so Alpine is one of the teams that have just revealed, they only just revealed their car yesterday, but again, whether or not the actual car that hits the track at Barcelona later this week is the same as the reveal is obviously to be determined. But yeah, they had longish side pods, but they still had a sloped surface on them, so it was a bit more in keeping with what some of the other teams are doing and not staying high and long like the Aston Martin. I guess the biggest thing about the Alpine was that the BWT has resulted in a lot of pink on the car compared to last year, and that they have a whole new power unit concept around the turbo with the split turbo, same as Mercedes have been running all these years since 2014. So they're hopeful that they might catch up in terms of power unit performance.
Well, that's interesting. I find that fascinating because, Honda played with Mercedes' split turbo strategy and then bailed on it just a year or two into their venture back in Formula One powertrains, and now officially that's over. But I find it fascinating that Renault via Alpine is now taking it up.
Yeah, and there are concerns about the reliability, so we might see a lot of detonating Renaults this season, which, Fernando's going to love that, because he went through that with the Honda, and, and coined the phrase F2 engine. So we might see a rocky relationship between Alpine and Alonso this year if he doesn't finish many races.
Although, to be fair, I think it was, at the time, it was a GP2 engine, not an F2 engine. Just to be completely GP2, pedantic about the whole thing.
You're right. The other team that's sort of taking their own path is McLaren. Now, McLaren had a really good launch. They showed not just an F1 car, but they showed their new Indycar and even an Extreme E car. And they had lots of good interviews with all their drivers, so I thought that was well worth a watch. But their car has completely the reverse suspension solution to everybody else. So they've gone for a pull rod front suspension and push rod rear. And pretty much
it's a push rod rear. Okay, I read about the pull rod front, but I didn't know it was push rod rear.
Yep, and so most of the teams are running push rod fronts and pull rod rears, which is pretty much what they had been running prior to this season. So McLaren think they may have found a more elegant solution with this switch. Certainly you can see in the front images that by going to the pull rod, it clears the rod itself out of the airflow for the radiator inlets. So whether or not that's critical to their aerodynamic solution, I guess will be determined, but that's certainly part of the thinking. And then the push rod at the rear may help to clear the suspension linkage and the structure required for it out of the Venturi tunnel area or the diffuser area, and might give them better performance there. So that's the theory doing the rounds, but we shall see if it's actually effective.
Yeah, no, that is fascinating. And the nerds among us, you have to love seeing these interesting solutions to the new regulations and how to work around it. And this is obviously among the most significant we've seen in quite a while. You could argue more significant even than 2014 because, yes, that was a new and very different powertrain, but this is just the entire car has fundamentally changed where downforce is generated and just how air is supposed to flow over the car. And it actually puts, in theory, more emphasis on the powertrain because, in theory, you're going to have less aerodynamic help. With these rules, it's going to be less sensitive wings and less downforce overall.
Well, I think that was the expectation, but the numbers that are sort of being rumoured suggest that these cars will be probably as quick as last year's cars by the end of the season. So I'm not sure.
And last year's cars were the fastest ever. So
yeah.
So
they probably find claw back all the downforce that were lost in the regulation change. But we shall see. One of the most fascinating launches I thought was the Williams for the FW44. Williams revealed the car.
Is it still an FW? So it's still posthumously
it's still an FW.
Frank Williams 44.
Yeah, which is a nice touch because
that McLaren is definitely so.
Yeah, McLaren used the MCL designation now. I think we talked about this in the past, whereas it used to be the MP4 when Ron Dennis was at the helm. That got ditched when he was pushed out. But yeah, good old Frank's initials still go with every car, which is very nice. But we had Joost and the two drivers revealing the new Williams, which bore no resemblance to the car they then subsequently drove at Silverstone a few hours later.
Right.
So rather bizarre, and it wasn't like the car was festooned with new sponsors' logos. I mean, I think they did secure a new sponsor in Duracell, but that was pretty much the only name on the car. So seems like a bit of a wasted effort. One of the more controversial things was the Williams have been running a Senna sticker normally around the front wing ever since 1995, obviously the year after Ayrton passed away in a Williams. And this year, Williams have decided that won't appear on the car anymore. And so that...
interesting.
Yeah, that they basically, Joost was defending it, saying, why should our drivers have to look at that every time they step into the car? And, it's a new era for Williams. We got to move on. And, I mean, it has been more than a quarter of a decade, but still, I think I always like that
quarter
touch.
of a century, I'm sure is what you meant.
Oh, yes, thank you. Quarter of a century. And, it was always a nice tribute, I think, to Ayrton. And I know that the Williams team was hugely affected, or at least those members that were there in 94 were hugely affected by the fact that he died in one of their cars. So it's a sad reflection of moving on with the times. I guess Williams will still be working with the Senna Foundation and doing things to support that, which is good. But it seems to me that they could have kept a sticker on the car somewhere to keep with a little bit more of the original Williams tradition. But there you go, that's just my view.
Yeah, I can see both sides of it, to be honest. I mean, the team has, while not changing names, definitely changed ownership. So I can see that point of, is this something we do in perpetuity or not? And if not, when is a good time to cut it off? But at the same time, what harm is it really causing to have a center sticker on the car? Is it a weight penalty? Are Senna stickers heavy?
Right.
I don't understand that. And pressure for the drivers, I have a hard time buying that one as well. If anything, I think there would be some honor involved. I mean, I can't help but think, if I were driving the same car as Jim Clark or Gilles Villeneuve or, pick a number of great drivers. I don't know. I think there'd be honor in that, not the other way around. Yeah,
I agree with you. And it's not like the first thing you've got to think about is the point of impact at the exit of Tamburello. And I mean, the sport, the safety in the sport has been transformed in the last 20, 25 years, right? And I just don't think Formula One drivers think about the risk anywhere like they used to in the 90s, or even, when it was really dangerous back in the 60s and 70s. So I don't think that's putting people like Nicholas Latifi off his game when he gets into the car. It does seem like a little bit of more of a let's just clear the decks and start afresh. But yet, then why are you still using the FW moniker? It just seems like there's a bit of a, muddled thinking there.
There is one other way to think about it, though. We're now to a place where the majority of drivers, I'm pretty sure I have this right, the majority of drivers were born after Senna's death. So it really is a different era. What do you think about that part of it?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there are a few. I mean, obviously Hamilton was born before, right? I mean, you've got a few drivers that are still Alonso.
Oh, yeah.
But look, I mean, Senna, like some of the other names you mentioned, one of the all-time greats. It's people like Senna are what make F1 what it is today. And so I think, there's always a desire in the sport to think about the latest and greatest car or driver. But, it is what it is because of this history. And we sort of turn our backs on that at our peril, I think. But how many people were even aware of that? I mean, how many times do you really see a Williams during a Grand Prix these days, let alone, pick out tiny logos on the front wing? So
right.
It's not going to be great shakes to anyone. It's another link to the past that's been cut. And I guess for people who've been following the sport for a long time, it could be a little disconcerting. But, Williams, they shook down their car in the rain. There's a little bit of curiosity around some of their design executions, particularly again around the side pods. They've got very, very short, abrupt side pods, which have raised eyebrows. So you've got basically everything from the really long ones for the Aston Martin, really short one from the Williams, and everyone else is sort of somewhere in the middle. And we'll see what makes the most sense. I guess their new technical director goes by the name FX. He's thinking more of a long-term sort of 5-year project, so that may not bode well for Williams' performance of this year. But let's hope they don't slip backwards and keep moving forwards.
Well, and Williams is a team that, obviously, I know you'll feel the same way. There's always a little bit of an extra place in your heart for that team. But also, I am, especially after seeing the performance of Pierre Gasly being taken out of the Red Bull racing team, how is Alex Albon going to perform now being outside of the Red Bull Racing factory? Are we going to see him thrive again? Latifi has certainly upped his game, but he's still not considered one of the top-rated guys. So how is Alex Albon going to perform, and how much better than Latifi does he have to perform to start getting people's attention?
Yeah, there's a few thoughts to that. So first of all, Latifi wasn't a million miles off Russell's pace at various Grand Prix last year.
Yeah, he definitely picked up the pace. Absolutely.
And as a side note, I agree with Lewis's assessment that those people giving Latifi death threats over what transpired in Abu Dhabi are just idiots. I mean, dear God, I just don't understand that logic at all. The guy was... The
good news is that those are the only types of idiots in the world we have to deal with. Thank goodness for that.
So, yeah, poor old Nick. He didn't mean to damage anyone else's Grand Prix. He was just minding his own business, trying to run his own. But anyway, yeah, Albon has a chance to revitalise his Grand Prix career, doesn't he? And, if you go back through his time at Red Bull... or even, was it STR when he raced for them, or AlphaTauri? I forget if they'd been rebranded.
I think it was still Scuderia Torosa at the time, yeah.
Yeah, he was, I think, more competitive than people give him a lot of credit for, especially as now we've got the Perez-Max Verstappen comparison, showing that even Perez, with all his years of experience, a race winner, a fairly known quantity, was still a long way off Max's pace last year. And that puts Gasly and Albon's struggles in better perspective, I think. But Albon was unlucky, right? If he had not been hit by Lewis Hamilton on at least two separate occasions, one in Brazil and one in Austria, then he might have won a Grand Prix himself, or at least got a really, really, good second place or podium. He lost two opportunities through no fault of his own. So I think, a lot of people sort of just wrote him off. But in reality, I don't think he did a terrible job. I think he'll be plenty pacey in the Williams. I think Williams do need, someone like him, a young up-and-coming driver, to fill the Russell void. and to put the Williams, occasionally up the grid when it performs well, which it did on occasions last year. Yeah, it'll have to outpace Latifi solidly throughout the balance of the year. And I think he'll have to put in some good performances now and again, but that'll be enough to probably revitalise his career, just like Pierre Gasly has done at AlphaTauri.
So, are there any other things you want to talk about with the cars? Because I'm starting to get a little itchy to have some predictions for 2022.
There's two more things we have to mention. One is the Ferrari, which have gone really crazy. I mean, Ferrari, there's two things that caught my eye about the Ferrari launch. I don't know if you see this picture, but there's a wonderful photograph of Matteo Binotto flanked by his two drivers, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. Binotto towers over them, and his hair, they must have put it in the wind tunnel because his hair is literally about 7 or 8 inches above the top of his head. It is a really bizarre picture, I tell you. You would not think it was a Formula One team when you look at that image.
Right, like it was like an alt-rock band or something.
Yeah, it was, it's curious. Ferrari are definitely coming out swinging. They're claiming that they've gone bald on their car, and you just have to take one look at the side pods with the really interesting concave surface to sort of get that vibe. It is.
But they say
really
that
odd.
every year that they've gone bold. I mean, that's in the template for their launch. I don't know. I don't. That doesn't carry much weight for me.
I think it's going to be either successful or a bloodbath. I think if it doesn't work, there's going to be a lot of personnel changes at Ferrari, honestly. And it's an odd looking design, and it's questionable whether it's the right design. But again, until we see the lap times, we can't really judge, can we? And then Mercedes, another team to issue renders and then show a completely different car, which I really like that sort of bait and switch maneuver. And they're going back to silver. So we got silver Mercedes again. They also ran their car at Silverstone, so they've done a shakedown. And I think it had some interesting design elements to it. But we, of course, will be eagerly awaiting the first times that we get from Barcelona later this week to get some sort of sense of the pecking order. I think we won't truly know that until quali in round 1, but we'll certainly get a better idea who's struggling.
Which is less than a month away now.
That's right. Yeah, there's just two tests, pre-season tests, 6 days. I would expect we won't have the unreliability in these tests. I think most cars will hit the ground running and be able to do a lot of laps. But, obviously what configurations they're running and what fuel load, we won't really be able to tell lap times. But we will get a clearer idea of all the cars relative to each other, rather than these silly renderings or show cars. So we'll get a better sense of the real look of these cars and if there's the common theme amongst them.
And that'll be interesting. It's always I've trained myself to pay virtually no attention to lap times other than just seeing just as you were saying, seeing number of laps completed, how many laps accumulated, how much time are they in the garage instead of running laps. How much are they going to a procedure, going to a plan, and how much are they adapting to something because of mistakes, those types of things. I think generally speaking, we'll have less reliability issues because we're talking about a largely carryover powertrain, but obviously the routes systems have to take to get from cooling ducts to core components, etc. That has changed through the body itself. So there's obviously issues that can still come up. And, maybe someone carried a number incorrectly or rounded up when they should have rounded down when it comes to cooling needs of a car, perhaps. But I think in general, we should expect the cars to be more reliable than, other big rules changes. But it's not until Friday and then really Saturday in Bahrain, so March 19th, that we'll have a true understanding of where we are. And it's going to be interesting to see because it's going to be Bahrain, not Australia. So we're going to get a better sense of the car's relative performance after the first race than we would have done were it Australia, because Australia is always kind of a little bit of a one-off and not entirely telling. Yeah,
that's very true. I think Bahrain will be a better indicator, although, again, with all the sand that gets blown onto the track, that's also somewhat been a bit of an outlier in seasons past. But it should be a better indicator than Australia has ever been. One note on the power units, Mercedes did come out with the statement that they think they've made the biggest number of power unit changes between seasons since 2014. And the justification for that is the types of fuels they're mandated to run this year. So that's interesting. I mean, it may also have something to do with their reliability issues last year. But there are going to be some changes to the PUs, as we talked about with Renault as well, or Alpine. I would agree with you. I would expect them to be reliable from the off. But there are more changes than you might expect when we're supposed to have stable power unit formulas from one year to the next.
No, fair enough. We do have that test coming up, but like I said, the actual race weekend is March 18th through the 20th. But right now, line in the sand, who's going to be Drivers' World Champion? Who's going to be Constructors' World Champion?
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious. We're in the predictions business, sir. We forecast.
Well, so obviously we've got the first year of the budget caps. So for those of us who were maybe under the misapprehension that everyone would have essentially the same resources, that's been burst because Aston Martin made a long statement about how, they're still going to be playing catch up to the bigger teams for several years yet. As they build their new factory and resources, and then obviously all the history and competency and capability of the teams that were bigger and had bigger budgets and were able to research more things. That legacy is going to continue for a while yet, even in the budget cap era and the equalisation on aero and CFD time. I think it was telling that Alpine, Rossi, who's their CEO, they're targeting 5th place in the championship. So, I mean,
that's
so they're
great.
Obviously assuming,
yeah,
they're obviously assuming that they'll still be behind Mercedes,
I thought
Red Bull.
They were targeting
McLaren
podiums for 2022.
Has it been made bigger up to 5 places now? Yeah, a 5th place in the Constructors' Championship is what they were targeting. So obviously they won a race last year, luckily. So they're probably still targeting podiums at the very least, but in the overall season, they don't think they can do much better than 5th. So best of the mid, well, no, I guess you'd call them Ferrari McLaren battle best of the mid pack, but best of the rest of the teams after the top 4, the big 4, if you want to call them that. The bottom line is, I don't think we should expect a huge reorganization of the order unless someone has really hit upon a really novel execution or interpretation of the rules like Braun did back in 2009 with the double diffuser concept. I don't think we should expect that the balance of power has really shifted, and we should expect maybe a Red Bull Mercedes title fight again.
And who's going to win that fight?
I don't know, Robin. I haven't got that far. I want to see who's quick first.
Predictions. You're predicting.
I like my fence. I want to sit on it. I think. I mean, at the end of the day, who was quickest at the end of last year? It was Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. So it's hard to look beyond Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes winning this year, isn't it? Unless Red Bull have found some more performance. I mean, that's one of the big things that's coming out of the new cars is the whole, steeply raked or non-raked concepts that have all been eliminated. So that whole, there's so many different things about the cars this year from prior seasons. So there is a lot of potential for someone to have got it really, really right or badly wrong. But I would expect those two teams to be at the front, and I would expect Lewis and Max to be fighting for wins.
I have to tell you, though, I absolutely love your anguish over this question when you must intellectually know there are absolutely zero consequences to being completely wrong. And yet you're still you're just in pains over this. So I'm going to educate you in how this is done. I predict that because Adrian Newey is a brilliant, brilliant designer and tends to just always find just elegant solutions to new car designs, that Red Bull Racing will have the edge for 2022. And in Red Bull Racing, it will in fact be Max Verstappen that has the edge over Sergio Perez. However, not by as much this year. That is prediction number 2. And I will, I'm going to add that I think Haas will still be in back And they will be very frustrated that they are not somewhere in the mid-pack for 2022 because they, quote-unquote, totally saved money for this car and been developing it longer than anybody else and blah, blah, blah. So those are my predictions. Now, if I'm totally wrong, nothing's going to change in my life whatsoever.
But if there are no consequences, then why not go a little bit, more avant-garde with your ideas? I mean, why don't we suggest that Lance Stroll will be world champion in his long side-podded Aston Martin?
You heard it here first. Christopher Roche thinks Lance Stroll is going to be world champion for 2022. We knew it. I will bet you a bottle of gin over that, Chris. It is done. All right. I love it. We've got Formula One testing coming up. The Formula One race is less than a month away. March 18th to 20th is the weekend. The same weekend will be the next big IMSA race. That is the 12 Hours of Sebring. That is March 16th to the 19th. That race is held on Saturday. But Indycar starts racing this coming weekend. Indycar goes to St. Petersburg this weekend to start its season on February 27th, I believe it is. And
who's going to win that race?
What an IndyCar will. And our good friend of the show, Rob Holland, will be competing in one of the support races there in his brand new, I believe, GT4 Porsche Cayenne. So Rob Holland will be at that race weekend.
Well, there you go. So what was your predictions for Rob's performance this season?
He's going to dominate.
Is that a completely impartial view?
Yes.
Okay, great. Is it what sort of competitions he got? Is it one make?
No. It's SRO racing. So it's similar, but not the same as IMSA. But it's sports car racing, and his car is in the GT4 class. I hope to God I'm getting this right, but I do know that it's a Porsche. It's this coming weekend, and he is an owner driver, Rob Holland, these days, and he's heading to Florida, and I'm certainly rooting for Rob. For this race weekend, the person I'm rooting for more than anybody else is Rob Holland.
Very cool. I mean, if it goes well, then he could aspire to an F1 seat when Porsche re-enter the Formula One in 2026.
There you go. Yeah, and we will say that a man of a certain age, as Rob is, could absolutely be in Formula One. No reason not to. The fact that he is of a certain age and also physically big, I don't know what his frame is, but he's well over 6 feet tall and wider than Alex Albon. He's probably 2 Alex Albons wide, and maybe about as tall. So anyway.
Well, I mean, the good news is George Russell said he could fit in this year's Mercedes, whereas when he last drove one, he couldn't. So cars can be made for drivers of different sizes.
This is very
true.
true.
Try hard enough. Hey, I just recalled.
Yes.
Sorry, you're on a roll here. I don't mean to interrupt your flow, but we didn't touch on the news that Michael Andretti has put in a Formula One entry for 2024. Do you see that?
No, what? No, I have not seen that.
Yeah. This was spilled by good old Mario on Twitter, saying that Michael had issued the necessary forms, of which nobody's quite clear what on earth they're talking about, to enter the F1 World Championship in 24.
That would be something. That would definitely be something.
The FIA said, well, that's really nice. Thanks very much. We weren't actually looking for any new teams, but we'll let you know. But clearly, having been rebuffed in his efforts to buy the Alfa Romeo / Sauber team, he's still serious about entering the sport one way or another, which is very cool for fans of Formula One this side of the Atlantic. So, how seriously that application will be taken and whether it'll actually result in anything or whether he'll actually be able to just buy another team, we'll have to wait and see. But Michael's clearly still got a clear vision for entering the sport sooner or later.
Wow.
Which is cool.
Yeah, no, that's very, very cool. I'm kind of surprised. Like, I'm assuming he's talked to Penske about this. Penske dabbled in Formula One. Michael Andretti, he never won the Indianapolis 500 as a driver, but he has won it as a team owner multiple times. And, maybe there's some unfinished business in Formula One. He's like, well, I'll do it as a team owner, perhaps. I don't know. But I'm reasonably comfortable to say I'm not alone in thinking that Gene Haas, being an American owning a Formula One team, has been a bit of a disappointment for us Americans. in terms of the Americanness of that team in Formula One. For Andretti to come in and be like just a real player in international motorsport as a whole, and being quite serious about getting into Formula One, that part of it is the most encouraging part.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that the popularity of F1 in the US is on a high at the moment. I guess seats for the Miami Grand Prix sold out in something like 40 minutes. So, and Austin's deal to run F1 races got extended through to 26, and they've obviously had record numbers there last year. So certainly Formula One's in decent health in the US at the moment. But obviously, for it to continue to grow to a wider audience, we do need more of a US obvious presence, I think, whether that's a team in the form of an Andretti, which would obviously an iconic name, or a competitive US driver, I think would really help move it to another level. So we have to hope that can happen sooner or later.
Yeah,
because Netflix can only do so much, I think.
That's right. But you feel you're compelling me to remind everyone that Formula One is owned by an American company. Liberty Media is an American company, and the American involvement in Formula One in the background is actually quite significant. But just in terms of what the general fan sees, you're absolutely right. It's very much not, it's like Premier League football.
I don't know what the average fan thinks of Formula One anymore in terms of, who's who and what's what. I mean, it's all so opaque, isn't it? I mean, you got Mercedes cars that aren't really Mercedes at all. I mean, even the team's 40% owned by an Austrian chap. So, and they have totally UK based. So it's always been a complex understanding. I guess it's always been thought of as a Eurocentric formula. But, it's always had a national, an international footprint. I mean, it's been a global sport. It's been a world championship as opposed to just a single continent series. But, the average individual who might be tempted to switch off NASCAR for F1 is going to need more of a draw than the whole sport is owned by Liberty Media. They might actually want a US driver to get excited about. That's usually what gets interest levels up, isn't it? I mean, if you just look at a recent case of Mexican interest in the sport, obviously skyrocketed with Sergio. Same in Spain when Alonso, came into the sport and started winning championships. I mean, the general interest in Spain had always been with bike racing. But
right.
Alonso,
well, and England, when Lewis Hamilton came on, I mean, England didn't pay much attention before that, right?
Yeah, there were no British winners prior to that.
Exactly. England had very little involvement in Formula One before Lewis Hamilton.
So what else have we got in store for us? Are you gonna who actually is going to win this weekend's IndyCar race?
I think it's hard. Just like we have Mercedes and Red Bull Racing being clear favorites in Formula One, we have Team Penske and Chip Ganassi Racing in IndyCar. It's going to be hard to think that anything major is going to change there, though Romain Grosjean is now a full-time IndyCar driver with Andretti Autosport, ironically enough. So it'll be quite interesting to see if he starts really making a splash now that he's in a big team, though Andretti Autosport has been a bit on the back foot the last few years. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I'm still kind of leaning towards Ganassi or Penske making a strong impression right away. And really, after last season, I think Joseph Newgarden's probably my favorite to win the race.
So I'm shocked. I thought you were either going to go for Helio Castroneves or, of course, Jimmy Johnson.
Well, I didn't want to take away your glory, sir. No, Michael Shank Racing, having Helio Castroneves back as a full-time driver is super cool. And Helio Castroneves did, in fact, yet again win the 24 Hours of Daytona with Michael Shank Racing. So he is definitely starting the year off right. But yeah, no, I'm going to stick with what I said.
So lots to get excited about. Racing is almost back, despite all the snow here in Michigan.
But if you can't even wait until this weekend, don't worry. I have a solution for you, and that is one of my YouTube videos. I've done, we've had a few weeks in between where, we're not quite hitting the podcast schedule super hard yet since we're still in preseason mode, but I've done quite a few videos, and one that I wanted to make sure people knew about was the Bmw M340i X Drive. This is a 2022 car that is an M car, but the base level M car, but with all-wheel drive. It's a weird, like if you look at what the tradition of an M car is, this is pretty far from that. And yet, if you look at what the essence of an M car is, this actually delivers quite well. Chris, don't even ask me the price. It's very expensive, but it is a very creamy 382 horsepower inline-6, turbocharged inline-6, and it is just a blast to drive.
Now, the only question I have is how enormous were the kidneys?
They were. The 3 Series has always been the 3 Series have been blessed with conservatism when it comes to kidney growth size. So they're growing, but they're not as ostentatious as they are on some BMW models. This is no X7 here.
You know, I remember the days when good old Chris Bangle sort of transformed BMW styling, and it was very controversial at the time. I remember the first 7 Series that came out after he'd led the studio on that design.
Yeah, with that stepped rear that turned a lot of heads,
The bustle back, a lot of detractors on that, but that's a drop in the bucket compared to what they're up to these days. I mean, they've got some very odd designs, and you know, I give them credit for trying to continue to forge their own path, but they're not good-looking cars.
Well, but the M340i does not have the bigger kidney grille that the new M3 M4 has. So it is still the older style. It's not I suppose the M3 M4 is the old style, like the 1930s, 1940s era, kind of bringing that back. So it's not that style. It's the more recent history style kidney grille. But how long that will last, I do not know. I
guess the problem for BMW is that I've been shocked a couple of times where some of the modern Lexuses or Lexi and some of the Genesis models look so similar to the BMW design cues of the last sort of 10 years that it's hard to tell them apart. So they've had to try and shake up their own styling to differentiate themselves again. But the result is, I'd say, controversial.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for that. Without even realizing it, you gave me a chance to plug yet another one of my videos, because not long before I did the BMW M340i, I did a review of the Genesis G70 sports sedan, and that one had the 3.3 turbocharged V6, which was 365 horsepower, so a little bit off the BMW, and it is a V6, not an inline 6, not quite as smooth running, and it's 376 pound-feet of torque, so actually a little bit more torque than the BMW. But, yeah, that car is a very clean, very well executed compact sports sedan, and, also very, very economically priced compared to the 3 Series. I mean, in terms of test car to test car, there was more than a $25,000 difference in price.
Wow, that's pretty significant.
No doubt. But if you check out both videos, you'll have a complete understanding of how I think of them and be entertained all the while. At least I desperately hope so. But Chris, before we go, do you have any closing thoughts?
No.
We've covered quite a lot. So for now, I would like to thank you for listening. Please take a moment to review us on iTunes or on whatever platform you get our podcast. Please leave comments on the episode of your choice by going to funwithcars.com. As always, I can be reached at feedback@funwithcars.com. Tweet us at fun_with_cars. And check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/FWCars. Oh, Chris, what a great conversation to have on a rainy Tuesday afternoon.
Thanks, Robin.
I'm Robin Warner. Goodbye.